US President Donald Trump's plan to levy tariffs on imports to the United States, though mostly targeting Europe and Asia, may hurt some African exporters, especially if he fails to renew the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA. Trade experts say the bigger impact of Trump's tariff policies would be a trade war with China, and this could end up having a larger effect on ties with Africa. Countries that have been in a trade war with the US are not African, so there is no cause for alarm. Most African countries are beneficiaries of AGOA. AGOA is a preference program that the US has accorded unilaterally to 32 sub-Saharan countries. Trump does not affect AGOA as it is because AGOA has been under review. Even though it is supposed to end, we might wait for the next phase of AGOA, if any, but not the current one. The US is currently in trade wars with Canada, China, Europe, and Mexico, with Trump paying less attention to Africa. Amid this shift, AGOA is set to expire on September 30, 2025, raising concerns about the future of US-Africa trade relations. Enacted in 2000, AGOA provides duty-free access for some products from 32 sub-Saharan African countries, totaling $9.7 billion in value in 2024. The African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, is a US trade program that provides eligible sub-Saharan African countries with duty-free access to the US market for certain products. AGOA is set to expire in September 2025, and its future under President Donald Trump's administration remains uncertain. President Trump's trade policies have historically favored bilateral agreements over multilateral frameworks, which could influence the approach to AGOA's renewal or modification. Some reports suggest that the administration might use AGOA as leverage to address specific policy concerns with African nations, such as land reforms or geopolitical alignments. For instance, recent tensions have arisen due to South Africa's land reform policies and its legal actions against Israel, leading to threats of aid cuts and potential re-evaluation of AGOA benefits. Africa policy watchers in Washington, D.C. are increasingly skeptical about the future of the African Growth Opportunity Act, a trade deal that offers sub-Saharan African countries duty-free access to the US market. The tone of discussions she has heard publicly and privately about AGOA's future in Washington. But she added there was still plenty of opportunity to reposition the program for the current environment in a way that shows it helps the US as much as it helps African countries. It should be reframed within the transactional mindset of this administration and this geopolitical era. The 25-year-old free trade program, set to expire in September, is unlikely to survive in its current form, Capitol Hill staffers and analysts told Semaphore, as US President Donald Trump pursues a policy of introducing tariffs with long-standing free trade partner nations. One congressional staffer who spoke to Semaphore on condition of anonymity said they viewed AGOA as 80% dead. News that 4 Republican congressmen this month called for South Africa to be ruled ineligible for AGOA over geopolitical concerns has only added to the uncertainty. In 2023, U.S. imports under AGOA topped $9.7 billion, down from $10.2 billion the previous year. The arrangement, which allows eligible African countries and businesses to export goods to the U.S. under favorable tariff-free terms, was dominated that year by $4.2 billion in crude oil trade. It also included around $1.1 billion in apparel and over $900 million in agricultural products. The U.S. Congress is responsible for approving the next iteration of the Act, which has typically commanded bipartisan support. But there is uncertainty about its future this time around, not least because of the tone of the debates around free trade in Washington. Trump's America First trade policy executive order on January 20th has called on the U.S. Trade Representative, the Treasury Department, and the Commerce Department to review all United States trade deals. Some analysts are awaiting the outcome of that review on April 1st to determine AGOA's future. The idea of a preferential trade deal is a difficult one in the current environment. And given the executive order, it leaves a question mark on AGOA's future. It could boil down to making a practical case in AGOA's favor, showing that tariffs are more costly than preferential trade for U.S. companies. That might help. The uncertainty around AGOA is surprising because while there are differences of opinion around technical details, the Trade Act has always received bipartisan support in Congress and from White House administrations of either stripe. Even Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, which is broadly believed to be a rough blueprint for Trump's policy approach, offered fairly standard language about AGOA ahead of last November's election. But AGOA seems to have been caught up in the shock and awe furor around the dismantling of USAID, and no one is certain anymore what might happen. I don't know, was the most common response I got in recent days when I spoke to Africa analysts and Congress aides. A few months earlier, it was when, not if. To be clear, while AGOA has had some wins, it has not been the kind of rip-roaring success that has driven African imports to grow exponentially every year. The $9.7 billion AGOA imports to the US last year was a miserly share of the $3.9 trillion of global US imports. And yet, even in this Trump 2.0 era of Washington upheaval, there is an optimistic take that's beginning to crystallize. This is that forcing AGOA to be seen as a transactional opportunity for the US as much as for Africa will help break the program away from its development partnership roots. If successful, the optimistic view is it could finally start to be transformative for more African countries. South Africa has been in the eye of the storm with regards to US relations in recent weeks in a range of sensitive geopolitical and domestic policy issues. AGOA came into focus as one of the levers that might be used against South Africa when 4 US congressmen called for its eligibility to be revoked. This is particularly significant because South Africa, the continent's most industrialized economy, is the largest beneficiary of the free trade program through which it exports cars, citrus fruits, wine, and textiles worth nearly $2 billion annually to the US. Neil Diemar, president of the South African Chamber of Commerce in the US, told Semaphore, "The biggest immediate concern is uncertainty, which discourages investment, disrupts supply chains, and forces businesses to consider alternative markets." Far from giving up on AGOA, it is expected that US Democratic Senator Chris Coons and his Republican counterpart Senator James Risch, who chairs the Senate's Foreign Relations Committee, will look to introduce updated legislation on the act, according to 2 people familiar with the plans. Last year, Coons and Risch introduced the AGOA Renewal and Improvement Act in a bid to jumpstart the delayed renewal process.